Your Honor, tell her to sign the divorce papers.
Sign? You expect me to force a pregnant woman?
But it's the law, Your Honor.
The law respects fairness. I will not compel her.
Unaware his pregnant wife owned 6 private jets, Marcus had filed for divorce thinking she had nothing. And 4 months after the judge read the amended filing and his lawyer's face went white, he was about to discover that losing the case was only the beginning of what he lost. Marcus had walked into that courtroom certain. A senior partner, a confident man, a husband who believed his pregnant wife was a part-time consultant with no money, no assets, no future without him. He had filed for divorce thinking she had nothing. But the judge read the amended filing. His lawyer's face went white, and the whole world learned that the quiet woman he underestimated owned 6 private jets, a company worth millions, and a name that was about to rise far beyond anything Marcus would ever touch again. Now the marriage was over. The ruling was final, and Marcus sat alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. His job gone, his reputation gone, the woman he left for gone too, staring at a magazine cover with his pregnant wife's face on it, holding the daughter he had never even met. But Vivian was no longer the woman he walked away from. She had a baby in her arms, 6 private jets behind her name, and a life that had moved so far past him that when Marcus finally found the courage to go looking for her, what he discovered standing beside her on that tarmac would break him in a way no courtroom ever could. So before Marcus drives to that airport to win her back, ask yourself this. What does a man say to the pregnant wife whose silence he mistook for weakness? After the judge read the amended filing and took everything, what did he find waiting beside Vivian and those 6 private jets that the courtroom never warned him about? And when he finally meets the daughter he abandoned before she was born, will Vivian open the door he slammed shut? Or has someone already taken the place Marcus threw away? Stay with this story, because the day Marcus went searching for the wife he thought had nothing, he was about to learn that she had already found everything, without him. The apartment smelled like takeout containers and recycled air and the particular staleness of a space where someone has stopped caring about the difference between day and night. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed on a Thursday morning in March with a magazine in his hands and could not move. He had stopped at the gas station for coffee. That was all. A simple errand. The kind of thing a man does when his morning has no shape anymore because his calendar is empty and his phone doesn't ring and the corner office with his name on it now belongs to someone 11 years younger who had never once made the mistake of underestimating his wife in open court. He had not meant to look at the magazine rack. But the cover stopped him the way a sudden sound stops you in a dark room. Because there she was. Vivian. His wife. His pregnant wife who had sat across from him in that courtroom 8 months along with her hands on her stomach and her silence reading as surrender. Except she had never been surrendering. She had been waiting. Regional Business Quarterly. The headline above her photograph read in clean bold letters. She already knew where she was going. She was standing beside one of her jets in a dark coat, one hand resting on the aircraft, the other holding their daughter against her chest. For months old. Small and perfect and entirely real in a way that punched through Marcus's ribs and grabbed something he had no name for. He had a daughter. He had never held her. He did not know the color of her eyes. Marcus stood in that gas station aisle for 11 minutes. He knew because he checked his watch when he walked in and checked it again when his legs finally remembered how to move. He did not buy the magazine. He could not afford to take it home and sit alone with it in that apartment. So he memorized it instead. Every detail. The angle of Vivian's jaw. The way the baby's head rested against her collarbone. The name of the aircraft visible behind them, painted in clean white letters on the fuselage. Ray. He didn't know yet that it was his daughter's name. He only knew that something about seeing it made his throat close. He drove home. He sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes without going inside. Then he went in and sat on the bed and thought about the 4 months since the ruling with the particular clarity that arrives when a person has run out of stories to tell themselves. The firm had called it a restructuring. But Marcus had run enough of those meetings from the other side to understand the language. The story of the courtroom had traveled the way those stories always do, quietly and completely, through lunch tables and lowered voices, until a man who had described his pregnant wife as having nothing was no longer the kind of man clients wanted managing their accounts. Claire had stopped returning his calls in April. A mutual friend had mentioned without meaning anything by it that she was seeing someone from the office now. Younger. Marcus had received that information and felt nothing except the hollow recognition of a man understanding that what he had traded everything for had never been real. It had been an exit. And exits, once you are through them, do not lead back. So Marcus had spent 4 months in a one-bedroom apartment with a parking lot view, eating alone, sleeping badly, and arriving again and again at the same destination every time the silence got loud enough. Vivian's face. Vivian's voice on that hangar floor saying the words he replayed every night whether he wanted to or not. You didn't lose me in that courtroom. You lost me every single day you chose not to ask. He set the coffee down on the nightstand. He looked at the ceiling. He thought about his daughter's name painted on the side of an aircraft he had never asked about, owned by a woman he had never truly known, living a life that was moving forward at altitude while he sat in a rented room trying to remember who he was before he became the man who filed that petition. Then Marcus did the thing that men do when they have run out of every other option. He picked up his keys. He drove to the airport. Marcus had never been to the private terminal before. That was the thing that hit him as he pulled into the visitor lot and cut the engine and sat looking at the building through his windshield. 4 years of marriage. 4 years of boarding those aircraft, settling into those leather seats, accepting a glass of water from the cabin crew with the casual ease of a man who believed he understood his life. And he had never once driven to the place where those planes lived. Never asked where they were hangared. Never thought to look at the name on the building as they taxied past it. Meridian Air Group. It was on the sign above the private entrance. Clean letters. Simple. The kind of signage that belongs to something that has been exactly what it is for a very long time and has never needed to announce itself loudly. Marcus sat in his car and read those 3 words and understood, with a slowness that was almost physical, that they had always been there. He had simply never looked. He got out of the car. The morning was cold and bright, the kind of March morning that looks warmer than it is. The sky a hard clean blue above the roofline. His shoes hit the tarmac and he straightened his jacket and he walked toward the hangar entrance with his heart doing something irregular against his ribs that he chose not to examine too closely. He heard her before he saw her. Not her voice. Her world. The low hydraulic hum of a hangar in motion. The precise radio chatter of ground crew coordinating a departure. The smell of jet fuel and polished metal and the particular charged air of a place where everything runs on schedule because someone made sure of it. He stepped through the entrance. And the first person who saw him was Patricia. She was standing 12 feet inside the hangar with a leather portfolio under her arm and a cup of coffee in her hand and the expression of a woman whose entire job for the last 4 months had included making sure this exact moment never happened. She saw Marcus and her body changed, shoulders squaring, chin lifting, one step forward already beginning. Then a single word, quiet and absolute, came from across the hangar floor. Patricia. Patricia stopped, and Marcus looked past her and saw Vivian. She was standing near the aircraft with a tablet in one hand and their daughter cradled against her shoulder in the other, speaking to a member of her ground crew with the focused calm of a woman in complete command of everything around her. She had not looked up yet, but she had heard him come in and she had said Patricia's name and that one word had been enough. That was power. Not loud, not performed. Just a woman so certain of herself that she did not need to raise her voice to stop a room. Vivian finished her sentence to the crew member. Then she turned. But Marcus had already stopped looking at her. Because he had seen Daniel. He was standing near the nose of the aircraft, early 40s, broad-shouldered, unhurried in the way that men are unhurried when they belong exactly where they are. He was helping a crew member with something near the landing gear, his movements easy and familiar, the movements of a man who had been in this hangar before. Many times before. Marcus told himself it meant nothing. An associate, contractor, someone from the logistics side of the business. Then Ray turned her head. For months old. Vivian's daughter. His daughter. And she turned her small head toward Daniel with the instinct that babies have for the people they know and trust, and she reached out both arms, those tiny perfect arms, and made the sound. Not words. Babies don't have words at 4 months. But the sound was unmistakable. It was the sound of recognition, of safety, of a child reaching for someone who had already become familiar in the way that only happens through time and presence and showing up again and again in the small, unglamorous moments that Marcus had never stayed long enough to occupy. Daniel looked up. He smiled at the baby, warm and immediate, the smile of a man who had earned that reaction. Then he looked at Vivian. And the look that passed between them was not dramatic or possessive or performed for anyone's benefit. It was just easy. The quiet ease of two people who had found their footing together and were not interested in explaining it to anyone who arrived late. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. Not like the courtroom. The courtroom had been a public unraveling. This was private and total and happened in the space of 4 seconds while he stood 11 feet inside a hangar entrance with his hands empty and his rehearsed speech dissolving word by word. Vivian walked toward him. Patricia watched. Daniel returned to what he was doing, because this moment was not his to occupy. "Marcus," Vivian said, and he looked at his daughter for the first time. Really looked at her. Close enough to see. She had Vivian's mouth and the particular alert stillness of a child already paying attention to everything around her. She looked at Marcus with the wide, serious gaze of someone encountering a new face and trying to decide what to make of it. His throat closed completely. "She has your father's eyes," he said. He did not know why he said it. Came out before he could stop it, low and cracked at the edges. Vivian looked at Ray. Something moved across her face, swift and private. Then she looked back at Marcus and waited. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said. "I came because I saw the magazine and I have a daughter, Vivian. I have a daughter I've never held and I drove here because I didn't know what else to do." Vivian was quiet for a moment. Behind her the engines of the aircraft were beginning their pre-departure cycle. A low building hum that filled the hangar and vibrated in the chest. "I know why you came," she said. "Then you know I mean it." "I know you believe you mean it," she said. "There's a difference." Marcus looked at Daniel. He couldn't help it. Vivian followed his gaze, and when she looked back her expression had not changed, but her voice dropped slightly. The way voices drop when something important is being said clearly and without cruelty. "Don't," she said simply. "That is not the conversation we're having today." Marcus nodded. He looked at his daughter again. Ray had lost interest in him and was examining Vivian's collar with the focused intensity of someone conducting serious research. "Can I be in her life?" he asked. "I'm not asking for anything else. Just tell me I can be in her life." Vivian looked at him for a long moment, and what lived in her eyes was not hatred and not softness and not the satisfaction of a woman watching a man get what he deserved. It was something quieter than all of those things. It was the look of a woman who had already done the work of deciding this before he ever walked through the door. "Ray deserves to know her father," she said. "Supervised visits, to start. Proper arrangements through our attorneys. Not because I want to punish you, Marcus. Because she is 4 months old and you are a stranger to her and trust is built in rooms you actually show up for." She let that land. Then she said the rest. "But I need you to hear something and I need you to hear it clearly. I am not angry at you anymore. I am not waiting for you. I am not a chapter that is still open. You came here today hoping to find a woman who missed you enough to reconsider. But the woman you're looking for doesn't exist. She grew into someone else while you weren't paying attention. She adjusted Ray against her shoulder. She grew into me." Behind her, Patricia appeared at her elbow with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood that the conversation was over. Vivian turned without drama, without a final look, and walked back toward the aircraft and toward Daniel and toward the life she had been building without interruption since the morning Marcus filed for divorce thinking she had nothing. Marcus stood on that hangar floor alone. And if you have ever watched someone walk away from you and understood in that exact moment that you have no one to blame but yourself, then you already know what Marcus felt standing there with the engine noise building around him and his daughter's face already moving past the point where he could still see it clearly. Before we go any further, this channel needs your help right now. My ex-husband said I would never make it in life. He said I would never reach 6,000 subscribers. And every single person who subscribes to this channel and turns on the notification bell is proving him wrong today. Click subscribe right now. Turn on that bell. Because every number on this channel is a voice saying that the people who underestimate us do not get to write our ending. Marcus drove home from the airport in silence. Not the silence of a man at peace. The silence of a man who has just watched a door close so gently and so finally that the absence of sound was louder than any slam could have been. He drove with both hands on the wheel and his eyes on the road, and the image of his daughter reaching for another man's presence playing on a loop behind everything he looked at. Ray, for months old. His blood. His child. And she had looked at him the way she would look at any stranger. With curiosity and no recognition and none of the instinctive reaching, she had offered Daniel without a second thought. Marcus had stood in that hangar and watched his daughter choose the presence of a man who had simply shown up. And he had understood in that moment the most brutal arithmetic of parenthood. Children do not love you because you are their father. They love you because you are there. He had not been there. He had not been there for the birth. Had not been there for the first weeks. Had not been there for the first smile or the first sound or any of the 4 months of small, unremarkable moments that had quietly built the world his daughter now lived in. He had been in a rented apartment eating takeout and feeling sorry for himself while his child was learning the faces of the people who deserved her trust. That understanding did not arrive gently. It arrived the way real things arrive, all at once and without mercy. Somewhere on the highway between the airport and the parking lot of a building he no longer felt was home. He sat in that parking lot for a long time. Then he went inside and opened his laptop and did the thing he should have done 4 months ago. He searched for parenting classes in Nashville. Not because anyone told him to. Not because his attorney suggested it. Because he was sitting alone in a room that smelled like failure and he had a daughter whose name was painted on the side of an aircraft he had never asked about, and he understood, finally and completely, that becoming someone Ray could count on was not going to happen by accident. It was going to require the same thing everything Rayal required. Showing up. Repeatedly. Without applause. He found a Tuesday night class at a community center 20 minutes away. He registered online. He paid the $40 fee with a card that had less on it than he was comfortable admitting, and he closed the laptop and sat in the dark and for the first time in 4 months felt something that was not shame or grief or the particular exhaustion of a man running from his own reflection. He felt direction. Small. Fragile. But real. 2 weeks later Marcus walked into that community center on a Tuesday night carrying nothing but his keys and whatever was left of his pride. The room was fluorescent lit and smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee and the particular warmth of a space that has held many people in difficult seasons. 12 plastic chairs arranged in a circle. A whiteboard with the words "Building Trust" written in blue marker. He took a seat. Around him were people who had no interest in performing anything. A young mother working 2 jobs who laughed too loud and apologized for it and then laughed again. A father in his 30s who had made a mistake and was trying to find his way back to his son. A grandmother, small and precise, raising her 3 grandchildren with the quiet ferocity of a woman who had long ago decided that love was not a feeling but a decision made every single morning regardless of how tired you were. Marcus looked at these people and felt his remaining pride dissolve like sugar in warm water. He was not special here. He was not a senior partner. He was not the man with the corner office and the reserved parking space. He was just a father who had not been present and was trying, late and imperfectly, to become someone his daughter could one day look at without the careful neutral gaze she had given a stranger in a hangar. The facilitator asked everyone to introduce themselves and say one thing they wanted their child to know about them someday. The young mother said she wanted her daughter to know she never stopped fighting. The father said he wanted his son to know he chose to come back. The grandmother said she wanted her grandchildren to know that family is whoever stays. When it came to Marcus, he was quiet for a moment. The fluorescent light hummed above him. He thought about Vivian standing in that hangar with their daughter against her shoulder and a life behind her that she had built before he ever knew her name. He thought about the magazine cover. He thought about the look on Daniel's face when Ray reached for him. He thought about 7 words written in blue ink on the back of a photograph by a man who had pointed his daughter at the horizon before she could even see it. She already knows where she's going. I want my daughter to know, Marcus said slowly, that I finally learned the difference between being present and just being there. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the grandmother nodded once, with the particular nod of a woman who has heard a great many things in her life and recognizes when someone has said something true. Marcus opened the workbook. He began. Meanwhile, at 30,000 feet above the Tennessee Valley, Vivian Carter was in the cabin of an aircraft that bore her daughter's name. The night sky outside the window was the deep particular blue that only exists at altitude, the color her father used to point at when she was 12 years old standing on the wing of a propeller plane in Georgia, squinting into the afternoon sun while he told her that the sky was not something you conquered but something you learned to belong to. Ray was asleep against her chest, small and warm and perfect and entirely certain of her place in the world in the way that only the deeply loved can be certain. Her breathing was slow and even in Vivian matched it without thinking, the way mothers do, breathing with their children, becoming the rhythm their children return to when everything else is unfamiliar. Daniel was seated across the aisle, reading something on his tablet, a cup of coffee going cool beside him in the particular way that meant he was properly absorbed. He looked up once and found Vivian watching him, and he smiled the quiet smile of a man who understood that some moments did not require words and was content to simply be in them. Vivian looked back out the window. She thought about Marcus standing on the hangar floor with his hands empty and his eyes on their daughter with an expression she had never seen on his face in 4 years of marriage. Raw, unguarded, genuinely broken open by something he could not manage or strategize or control. She did not feel triumph about that. She did not feel anything that resembled satisfaction. What she felt was something quieter and more complicated than either of those things. She felt the particular sadness of watching someone finally understand something too late to use it. She hoped he would go anyway. She hoped he would sit in whatever room was next and do whatever hard, unglamorous work was required of him. Not for her. She was not a destination he was working toward. But for Ray. Because their daughter deserved a father who had learned, even slowly and painfully, that love was not a courtroom argument. It was a Tuesday night in a plastic chair when nobody was watching and you showed up anyway. She pressed her lips to the top of Ray's head. She closed her eyes. Outside the window the clouds were below them and the sky ahead was endless and dark and full of stars, and Vivian Carter was exactly where she had always been going. Not because anyone gave her permission. Not because anyone finally saw her clearly enough to approve. But because she had spent her whole life doing the patient, precise, unglamorous work of becoming someone who belonged at altitude. Her father had known it before she did. She already knows where she's going. And she did. She always had. If the story moved something in you, if it reminded you that the quietest people in the room are sometimes carrying the largest lives, then please subscribe to this channel right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. My ex-husband said I would never make it in life. Prove him wrong by hitting that subscribe button today. Every single subscriber is a voice that says the people who underestimate us do not get to write our story. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you are watching from. This community is growing every single day and your voice belongs in it. And before you go, sit with this question and answer it honestly in the comments below. Have you ever poured everything you had into someone who never once thought to ask who you really were? And if you walked away, did they only realize your worth when you were already gone? Or did they never see it at all? Because somewhere watching this right now is a person who has been sitting in their own silence waiting for someone to finally ask. And this story was for them. 2 more stories are waiting for you on screen right now. I chose them because if this one stayed with you, those will follow you home.